Welcome to Left, East to West with me, Nikki Hill.
And me, Tom Parkin. Thanks for joining. And if you can, tell others about the show. Our audience is building, and your word of mouth really helps. Another busy week. We've been watching a couple interesting stories that are probably below the fold in your area. One about the police corruption scandal roiling Toronto Police Services, and also a study on how anti-feminist ideology is increasingly relevant to national security.
We have a little bit of a theme here in today's episode as well. And that leads us into a feature interview with Shannon Phillips. She's a former Alberta NDP MLA and cabinet minister and frequent podcast and commentator. So she's going to add some thoughts about the divisions growing in the governing Alberta UCP, Jeff Rath's referendum campaign that's looking quite Trumpy, and what the Alberta NDP needs to do to win in 2027.
Shannon has a ton of insight, and this interview will add a lot for those concerned about Canada and the threat. A disunited Canada is open to against Trump. So before we get to Shannon, let's take a look at this week below the fold.
So there's a pretty major corruption scandal in Toronto with officers facing charges of working for organized crime. Because of the way information's coming out, Tom, it's been hard to piece it together. So can you take us through what's going on and some of the political implications?
Yeah. Last June, three masked and armed men attacked a Toronto area house planning to commit murder, police say. But the police knew these guys were coming, and they arrested all three. The man that they had come to kill was a deputy superintendent of the Toronto South Detention Centre. That's a remand center, the largest remand center, certainly in Ontario, and maybe Canada, in Etobicoke. And this is a place where people are sent when they're awaiting court. The attackers were allegedly recruited and directed to to this man's address by a guy named Brian DaCosta, who is, according to police, a major drug dealer. And it seems DaCosta got the address from a Toronto police officer, Timothy Bernhard. Bernhard is now facing several charges for accessing police data for unauthorized purposes. Bernhard and other officers were being paid by this crime group to illegally access and share police data the crime group then used in extortions, robberies, and at least 7 doorstep shootings. And there's some public video from security cams of these doorstep shootings, and they're just incredible, like stunning stuff. A single man in the security cam coming up, standing on the sidewalk, standing in the driveway, just firing off like 20, 25 shots into the front of the house, into the cars on the street. And just the sound and the flash from the gun is like, holy crap. And over days in different parts of the province, this is going on. These are obviously intimidation tactics. Nobody seems to have been killed, according to police reports. Police haven't said why these doorstep attacks were launched, and it seems that Bernhard and the other officers did a lot more than take payments from a crime family in exchange for police data. They weren't just kind of sidekicks. It seems like they were true partners with this crime group. DaCosta has been arrested on possession of illicit cannabis and fentanyl for the purpose of trafficking. And members of his crime group are charged with trafficking cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, MDMA, oxycodone, and other drugs. Bernhard and 2 other Toronto police officers have been charged with trafficking offenses. 2 are charged with conspiracy to traffic cocaine. The third is charged with possession for the purpose of trafficking cocaine. So in all, 27 people face charges, 8 of whom are current or recently retired police service officers, and this thing is not done yet. Just bridging back to that deputy superintendent of the Toronto South Remand Center, he was apparently targeted, so say police, because he was doing too good a job at stopping the flow of drugs into the prison. So that's why That's how he got on the hit
Mhm.
list.
Mhm.
So the questions now are: how many more charges will be coming against these 8? Are there more? Did people turn a blind eye? Um, these are all very alive, and every couple of
Yeah.
days we're hearing just a little bit more about charges or other people getting suspended in police forces. Now, one of the pieces of this, okay, this is a politics show, so let's talk about the politics of this a bit. The Toronto Police Association said that a broader investigation of the use of police data, which apparently has no guardrails on it,
Oh, wow.
is yeah, you can just kind of do it. And like the fact that these guys were accessing police data wasn't stopped, rather it was
Mhm.
discovered, right?
Mhm.
And of course, the story about Shannon Phillips is that people
Yeah.
access, like, for absolutely no legitimate law enforcement purpose, accessed
Yeah.
her data and used it to follow her, to take pictures
Mhm.
of her. So that's a different
Yeah.
story. Uh, but the story here is that the Toronto Police Association at first said, well, we don't really need any broader review. We don't want anybody else uh, being collateral damage, any other officers. Bit of a funny thing to say.
Mhm.
A couple of days later, they pull back on that and decide that is not the position that they want to be held account for. So the, the TPA is also being pretty involved in politics in the city. They are a pillar, I'd say, of the conservative establishment. They endorsed Doug
Mm.
Ford. They endorsed Pierre Poilievre. Some people said that was inappropriate. I may have been one of those people. Very much agree that it was. Uh, but in this election year, that pillar is obviously going to be a lot weakened because the TPA is going to be spending a lot of its time defending its members from criminal charges. And wherever they go, their voice will be much weakened because not only not only is this corruption case alive, um, but their first instinct was to kind of say, let's not look any deeper. So
Mhm.
that's probably a plus. Negative. It's a negative for the conservative side in the municipal elections that we're going to have this fall. So therefore, probably a plus for Olivia Chow and those progressives who are seeking council seats
Mhm.
in October.
So lots here going on, and lots of municipal elections coming up this fall as well. But no, that's interesting. It's like seeing how the guardrails here for inappropriate use of data. It's interesting. We had a story in BC recently about inappropriate use of healthcare data as well, and I was
Mm,
surprised to see where some of those guardrails are missing, and a lot of people losing jobs and having discipline over accessing data. So, I think those places where we think are safe are maybe not when we look at these stories a bit more.
yeah. Okay, now switching gears, Nikki, there's a study making news, which isn't exactly news to some of those who've been paying attention to these issues, but is
Yeah.
raising awareness on a national issue, sorry, an issue of national security that many don't think about, which is
Hmm.
the anti-feminist movement. Give us
Hmm.
the background on that, please.
Yeah, so like you said, it's certainly not a new issue, and I think there's a number of journalists and academics who have been trying to speak about this for years, try to bring it more out to the public domain as well. So it really is though, and mirrors into where we see actually things we'll talk about later in terms of Alberta, but the rise of movements that are taking more extreme positions and what that relation has to not only our sovereignty but to terrorism, to violent activity, and maybe those connects aren't things that people make themselves. So I think really interesting going on here where we're not just thinking about concepts people also might not have heard that much, like the growth of the manosphere.
Mm,
That's a real term,
hmm
but being anti-feminist ideology here, so not just something existing online. I think it's these, as extremist views come to light, how they stand out in the real world and become security concerns. So, the Federal Standing Committee on the Status of Women, which is for those that aren't as familiar, it's a parliamentary committee. It's cross partisan. It does studies regularly, reports. I've actually testified to them myself on different issues pertaining to women, policies, legislation, and they prepare recommendations in a report. So they actually have been doing a study that wrapped up recently on anti feminist ideology. And these folks had dozens of witnesses from women's organizations, civil society, academics, advocates, but also they had some very interesting testimony that I think has probably been getting the most media, and a little bit of limited media here because
Mm-hmm.
these parliamentary committees don't always get as much
Mm-hmm.
coverage as maybe their work should pertain to. But they had some expert witnesses from CSIS, and there was a little bit of shrouding and mystery around these experts as well, which is probably what got a little bit more of the attention. They were only able to use their first name, some anonymity here about them as they were testifying. But they're testifying in this parliamentary committee was specifically on how this anti-feminist rhetoric and movement is becoming a serious issue, increasingly relevant to Canada's national security landscape. So, like we've said, anti-feminism is not new. I think a lot of people sort of centered around milestones that we continue to honor and try to learn from, like the Montreal Massacre, which is over 30 years ago now. What's newer now, I think, is the speed at which the movement can build, and they're linked to terrorist attacks again in the real world. And I think the other thing that's not new is I think an awareness that since the pandemic, people have organized online or had access to more information, or found perhaps that
Mm-hmm.
online communities, which is what the manosphere really is,
Mm-hmm.
that looks like it agrees with some of their principles, but in reality is trying to bring them down a path. The manosphere in particular is sort of a grievance-based movement, if you will, that blames women and feminism and democratic institutions for it's particularly for white men, for economic security, for feeling like they don't have a voice in politics, but also personal frustration. So a lot of this can stay online. And certainly, I think the online visibility is very high for women in the public eye. Women in politics see it much more prevalently, but it is an organized movement. And I think it is,
Sure.
trying to create this system. And of course, we see it in the States a fair bit. So,
Yeah.
this is where you have to bring in CSIS experts to a parliamentary hearing to get a bit of attention on it and talk about the rise here. So I think, when one frame, the good news from that was that it's a relatively small segment of the population who is being ideologically motivated around this violent extremism, but it is, something that there is relevance to in thinking about our national security. And I think particularly in, light of what we're looking at in the US and what parts of those movements impact us, whether it's, engagement with Albertan separatism, but that
Mm-hmm.
those drivers around public safety and democracy. So again, not a surprise to any woman with profile who spends time online, or academics who have been trying to surface this issue for years along with
Mm-hmm.
reporters. But so credit to them, but hopefully some additional profile and the resulting study from this federal committee brings it a little bit more of light to decision makers who I think have a role in this. There's a role for male politicians to be playing in setting example. I think it went downhill pretty quickly in the United States when we look for those role models. But there's a huge need here, I think, that's emerging, and maybe when it enters into national security zones, we start seeing a little bit more action.
Yeah. Well, nobody, well, not nobody, but a lot of people never heard of incels before all of a sudden,
Yeah,
everybody was
exactly.
like, what? There was a guy in Toronto who just killed a bunch of women, because he was what?
Yeah,
So that, that these things are there, and they're
yeah,
deep in subcultures.
yeah.
And some people are pretty good at surfacing them. It reminds me of the story about Steve Bannon, he
Hmm.
was involved in this, in the gaming, like, online games business for some time
Yeah,
after he
yeah.
left, Wall Street. And he set up a series of game boards or discussion boards. Of course, these are mostly young men,
Hmm.
and he used them to create well, really to weaponize the conversation and create a place where the conversation took on very anti-woman and anti-feminist
Hmm.
tone. And so we've seen that become a
Yeah.
key part of MAGA. And we've seen things like MAGA supporters threaten women in politics. We saw a plot to kill,
Hmm.
Senator Gretchen Whitmer. And of course, we saw the January 6th attack. So,
Hmm.
why in Canada, um, the same tactics of kind of radicalizing and finding the spaces where men can be, young men especially, can be
Yeah.
radicalized, and bringing them to a violent belief, political belief.
Yeah.
Why couldn't it happen here?
Well,
I
and
think
some
it
of the
could,
manosphere is quite
of course.
innocuous, right? It's, health
It's like
tips that
men's
then
health.
lead
Yeah,
you in. Yeah,
yeah.
you're like men's
Men's
health, and
health.
all of a sudden you're in
Yeah.
this like, it's
Well,
feminism destroying your daily life and your health. So
yeah. This is
it
sort of the
is like,
Yeah, this is sort of the Jordan Peterson thing. It's like you should make your
yeah,
bed. Well, yeah, we should all make our bed. Yeah, we should make our bed in
yes,
the
yeah,
morning. But that seemingly innocuous thing that's not the beginning and end of what he's thinking about, or
exactly. Yeah,
what a man is. And I'm always
yeah,
very suspicious of any man who tells other men what they should be. But that's for each person to decide for themselves, is my opinion.
yeah.
At any rate,
What's making their life? Anyway, yeah. So
yeah,
I think we'll see if this issue stays on the table once
yep,
and what comes out of this study. But we're going to take a little break and come back with Shannon Phillips.
okay.
Let's welcome to the show Shannon Phillips, former MLA for Lethbridge and former Minister of the Environment. Shannon's also a part of the team at the popular podcast, The Strategist. So we're really happy to have her join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And perhaps the most worrying question in Canada right now is in Alberta. And it's where it's the intersection of Danielle Smith, Donald Trump's 51st state, and Alberta separatism. So let's dive right into that
Yeah.
topic, if you don't mind. The Alberta Prosperity Project is the group meeting with Trump officials about their campaign to gather 177,000 names and trigger a referendum to withdraw Alberta from Canada. I've been through their website up and down, and it says nothing about who's on the APP board. It doesn't say anything about how this board is chosen, who the members of this association might be, how decisions are made, or who funds them. Can you shed any light on these questions for us?
Well, right now we are in a bit of a black hole legally in terms of the donations made to them before the actual process started are not disclosed. So,
Mm,
we'll never know.
mm,
And that's just the way it goes. It's the same thing for the Forever Canadian petition that Thomas Lukasik did. Now that they're out of the petition gathering phase, they can raise money and it's not disclosed. They have said that as they are raising money, that they are not going to take any American money. The other guys haven't made that commitment at all. So that's the situation we're left with, and that's part of this is Jason Kenney's legacy. He passed these laws to start with. I know because I voted against them.
mhm,
And they, there was a whole suite of them that came in when they won in 2019. It was citizen initiative referenda. It was recall. And all of those chickens have come home to roost.
mhm. What about the board? Do we don't have any transparency on do they have
Oh.
members? Do the board get elected by somebody, or is it kind of a self-appointed little kingdom?
This is the Convoy 2.0.
Mm,
Right.
This is not, and so like the cast of characters, some of them are even similar, but certainly in terms of their organization or lack thereof, I think you can understand it as the Convoy 2.0. So you've got all kinds of weird money sloshing around, all kinds of very bizarre communication tactics and use of very of outlets that you or I probably will never see. Pushing out information into channels that, ordinary progressive people or just sort of
Yeah.
centrist type
yeah.
people will never see their communications. But when you do see it, it's pretty wild what they are saying. And their main spokespeople, that those folks have broken into the mainstream coverage, I would say. And they are people who were quite active during COVID, guys like Dennis Modry, who are, avowed anti-vaxxers and real conspiracy theorists, really coming out of that world and hold some fairly objectionable views when it comes to articulating things like white replacement theory, which is a white supremacist view of the world that white people are being replaced in the
Mm,
United States. And they've imported that into the separatist discourse as well. So you see some of the same cast of characters. But what's interesting about this is almost more decentralized in some ways than the Convoy was, right? The Convoy had your Chris Barber, Tamar Leach, these kinds of people. There were kind of, because it came out of, in part, sort of the influencer world, right? Again, in
Yeah.
channels and in communications media that you or I would never probably come across.
Hmm.
Um, and separation seems to be coming from somewhere else. Like Jeff Rath and Dennis Modry are kind of like old guys. They're not really influencers in that kind of
Hmm.
like that severely online space. They're coming more out of the I would say the long-standing uh, uh, wing of separatist and far right engagement in the UCP.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit else where they're coming out of, and I think some of that 2.0 themes here. So, in mid-December, we saw Donald Trump releasing his national security strategy, but I think key here pledging U.S. support for movements inside other countries that are aligned with the MAGA vision. So, in our case, obviously, we're seeing that Canada is the 51st state message. So, supporting Rath's APP clearly fits with Trump's threat here to support allied foreign movements that are, and looking through where we've seen news reports lately, we're seeing some of that coordination with Trump officials. What do you think is going on here with Trump and Smith and the APP?
Well, I think I can only take what they've said at face value. And what they've said is they have met with State Department officials, and I think we can understand it as part of this sort of helping out in Europe for Orban or Orban adjacent
Hmm.
movements in different parts of Europe, and. And they sort of insist, the White House sort of insisted that it was lower level State Department officials that they met with. We have no idea whether that's real
Yeah.
or not. You can't trust anything that comes out of the White House. They're just lying liars who lie. But we do know that everyone has indicated that there have been at least 3 meetings with the State Department since last April with the Alberta Prosperity Project, and the
Mm.
content of those meetings, if it is to be believed, it should be alarming. Talking to the U.S. about a $500 billion line of credit. Well,
Hmm.
first of all, I thought we were all going to be so rich with our bag of magic beans after we separate. So that
Yeah.
is ridiculous on its face. I mean, they don't even know how governments raise money out on the bond market. They have no idea how government finances itself. It's not a line of credit. They
Yeah.
sell bonds. Oh my God. Uh, but they even talked to them about an Alberta military. And that to me is the big flapping red flag of a national security
Yeah.
risk that
Yeah.
that's the one that really made me nervous, because that's not a flight of fancy. That is interfering in our national security.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
not get too alarmist, but it is along a continuum to the Putin play, which is to set
Exactly.
up
Donbass.
clones in clone political movements in the Donbass, get them to arm themselves in militias, and then call in the Russians as it's that's a pretty dark and hopefully far-fetched view, but it's kind of along a continuum. But
Well, you know
uh,
what, Tom, though? Here's the thing. They don't have to arm themselves in Alberta. They can use this thing, the toxic rectangle of our phones.
yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
a- and
Yeah.
and that's to me like the piece that is being used. The messages are being pushed constantly.
Hmm.
If you go pick up a person in rural Alberta's phone and look at what they are being bombarded with, you would be shocked.
Hmm.
It is an alternate reality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that to me is the national security risk. You don't need
Yeah.
guns anymore.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we saw a video surface of Danielle Smith's UCP party president praising Jeff Rath for doing a great job, saying a majority of the UCP board are separatists, and outlining a process to confirm the UCP as a separatist party. But we also see some conservatives who are taking some shots at these guys. Uh, Polls show that conservative UCP supporters are not, they're out split on the issue of separatism. The NDP supporters are almost unanimously opposed. So is this now the divided Conservative Party? Is Smith more under control than in control?
She's in control by riding that horse
Hmm.
of separatism, right? It's exactly like Kenny tried to ride 2 horses, and it
Yeah.
had
Hmm.
predictable results. And so she has decided. I mean, when she first got elected in, I guess it would have been late 22 to the leadership, she gave an interview with Rick Bell that, it was fascinating. At the time, I thought it was going to be a political liability for her. Of course, I thought a lot of things were going to be a political liability that were
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, a lot of things get said, and you think, wow, that's a career ender. Things just
No,
move
keep
on.
going.
Yeah, yeah. 2 years later, you're like, that was tame, right?
It was very tame because it
Yeah.
essentially said that's fine. We don't need some of these rural or urban seats rather in Calgary or Edmonton. Right. We don't need to win anything in Edmonton, and we can afford to lose quite a few in Calgary. We're going to go to where the grassroots are at. That's sort of code for, the people who threw out Kenny over wanting to have fewer than 1,000 deaths over a 2-month period during the best summer ever. That's, eventually he came to that conclusion and they threw him out for it because I guess they wanted more. I thought at the time, well, she's just telling people not to vote for her. And that's exactly what
Sure.
she was doing, but it worked. And the way the math is, it will continue to work. And so that's the strategy, is that she can even lose a couple more with redistribution. They'll make it so that those are ones
Right.
that are winnable for them. Absolutely, they will. We'll see how that all shakes down by the end of March. But she can absolutely go track in more into that far right part of the UCP, because the Chamber of Commerce conservatives, they're not going anywhere. They want their tax cuts. They want their healthcare privatization. They want their lax labor laws. They'll do anything to get it.
Okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit to referendum talk. So, there's obviously targets here for names on referendum petition and hitting and presumably if they get to that point, then we're into a different kind of campaign zones. We've got the leaves and the stays. Presumably, we know who's on the leave campaign leadership side now, because that's pretty present. But how do you think the stay side would be organized and led? Who's behind that? And how could some of these decisions and the need to focus on a referendum either help or hurt the NDP's chances?
This is still a bit messy, right? Because we don't know what kind of question is going to be put. We don't know the role of Parliament. If it's an actual secession question, then under the Clarity Act, it has to be considered by the House of Commons. But if it's
Right.
Thomas Lukaszik's question, which is, do you want to remain part of Canada? That's not a succession question. So it's actually not clear to me that the Clarity Act would then be triggered. Because the Clarity Act only talks about if you're asking to leave, not if you're asking to stay.
Right.
Right? Some of this timing, I'm not sure about. Danielle Smith did say yesterday that if the Separatists get their 177, then she'll put it to referendum. So then
Right.
the ball would be in the House of Commons court. They would have to consider the matter. It's not clear to me what will happen with Thomas Lukaszik's $456,000 or person question. And right now, what would make sense would be for her to put that question on the ballot, and then her reams of other questions. Because if she wants the answer to be yes to all of her other anti-immigration and other questions, if she wants us to vote yes on those, she might put the popular do you want to stay in Canada as a yes. It becomes very, very difficult then for the campaign, because the campaign has to say vote yes on what? It's again, we have the question of clarity in these kinds of referenda, and the reason why we as a nation grappled with this since 1995, and it took essentially 6 years to get through the court reference and then the Clarity Act, because this stuff is complicated. I'm not.
And serious,
And
big
it's
ramifications,
the most serious thing that we could possibly do as a country. And so to that, I do think the Forever Canadian people are getting ready for a campaign. I think that's they are doing things like putting it out to they couldn't keep their list, right? Everybody thinks they have a list of 456,000 supporters. They don't, because it went into Elections Alberta. So they're doing a push to essentially gather those people who signed the petition, right? And having them sign up as supporters, reaching out to their canvassers, getting them activated again. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
The NDP from the very beginning has said that they don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
That would be a major departure from how other unity conversations have happened
Yes.
in this country. Because even though Danielle Smith's refusal to take a position is a major departure from other unity conversations, because she won't say, and she's allowing separatists within her caucus, which is astonishing. But the NDP have said, obviously, like, we support remaining in Canada, but they haven't said they're going to do anything.
Yeah.
So that is not the position that, Robert Bourassa or any of these other people have ever taken.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we see another person kicking around a lot all of a sudden, which is Jason Kenney, fishing for something, maybe. Fishing for being the yes conservative, no separatist, maybe. Fishing for being the guy who picks up the federal conservatives after Pierre Poilievre, maybe. Like, where does he fit in this little game of let's decide what happens to Canada?
I think he makes centrist type people feel good. Like, let me just tell you, it doesn't make anybody feel good in Alberta, in particular conservatives, right? Like, the extent to which conservatives dislike that man in Alberta cannot be overestimated. Like, he is universally, I mean, outside of some, donor classes and, like nice dinners at Harper's house or whatever, like he's not, federally, the conservatives, still like him. I imagine he could still raise money for them and do all those things, right? Like, he still has a fan club, but provincially, this is not the case. So what he is good for, though, is to pull the alarm bells in a way that Harper is a bit constrained as a former PM. Right. And chair of AIMCO, I might add, which is the asset manager for all of our pension funds, makes it awkward. But we know that those guys in that corner are quite distressed at all of this. And so Kenney, I think you could read him as a proxy for all of that. For that. Yeah. As for his future, I mean, who knows? His future's not in Alberta politics. Again, to my previous comment, although, Danielle Smith also left pretty universally loathed after the big floor cross, and, people can rehabilitate themselves. Life is long. But who knows what his other machinations are. At some point I would think we age out of this stuff, but maybe that's just me.
So there's a saying about that one, Shannon, about, the good die young and the jerks hang around forever. But jerk is not usually the word.
I don't know. I don't know how you don't just get tired and want to walk away, but maybe that's just me.
I think you're just counting us all on that too right now. So I'm not sure it's the jerks versus those that stick with politics too long.
All right. Smith has called this referendum or a series of referendum questions for the 19th of October. You're already speaking of 9 questions, kind of different variations of the same question, which is, which people in Alberta shouldn't get healthcare. And she's spinning this story that our UCP spends most generously in Canada on healthcare than any other province. But cuts are coming because non-residents are overburdening the system. This kind of story. Now, I bet you're pretty well informed of where Alberta ranks in the healthcare spending, so I'll leave that one to you. But what I did look up this morning was on the number of non-citizen non-residents in Alberta. It's about 280,000 in a province of 5 million. About 200 of whom are here because Danielle Smith asked Justin Trudeau to bring them here to work. In fact, she demanded more. And these are workers working and paying taxes in Alberta. So it seems, at any rate, a day later, after she announced that she's going to kind of take aim at these people who have been brought here to work and pay taxes into Alberta, she's confirmed that the date of any referendum on leave or whatever it's going to be from Jeff Roth will also be held on October 19th. So obviously this is that the timing of the announcement was inverse from the decision, clearly. So the question in my mind is, what is Smith's thinking about how her questions frame any question that comes from Jeff Rath and the APP, helping or hurting his vote?
Well, the anti-immigrant discourse is core and
Mm-hmm.
key to the separation movement. When you read any of their online interventions, or when you attend their town halls, any of this, the idea being that we are having some sort of immigration system foisted upon us, imposed on us, that is in fact leading to the province being less white. And that sounds like an eye poker to us, but that is what they say out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels horrible to even paraphrase it, but that's what they're saying out loud. We're saying the quiet part out loud, right? We need to remember
Mm-hmm.
that, a good 10-15% of Albertans, and probably a lot of other provinces, hold these views and have for some time. They were foundational to the
Mm-hmm.
Reform Party. For example, around, Ottawa is allowing too much immigration. At that time, absolutely, they were foundational. But we are seeing a resurgence of it in I would say, large part because of what the algorithm is feeding us,
Mm-hmm.
particularly
Yeah.
outside of urban centers.
Yeah.
Um, and so they're of a piece. What does this do for Danielle though? I know they have done a ton of polling on this, and this is a way for them to move the goalposts. You're seeing some of the conflict
Mm-hmm.
around climate change, electricity regulations, those kinds of policies. That conflict is being turned down. So we're just finding another thing to scream about, because there is no conservative movement anymore in Alberta without grievance.
Mm-hmm.
It is foundational to who they are. The takeover from, the old PCs who existed to govern, like the other brokerage parties have always existed to govern. That takeover is complete. You must
Mm-hmm.
have grievance.
Yeah. So, and I think, that speaks, I think, a little bit to what the work that Jeff Rath is doing with the Alberta Prosperity Project, right? Like they're building a movement, they're signing up tens of thousands of more MAGA-based Albertans. They're bringing people together with some of these grievances around a specific issue. So what do they do next with all of these people that they're building? Do you think it's a new political party? Is it working within the UCP? Like what is that sort of looking like on the ground?
Well, they fight with each other. It's one of the small mercies and little silver
You see
linings
that in
of this
BC
whole
too. Yeah.
thing, right? They cannot get along. Couldn't organize a two-car parade, these guys. And so that's good. We like that. It will ebb and flow. I think that movement will. And they'll
Hmm.
decide, if they've decided they can't, they no longer have control over what happens coming out of Edmonton, out of the legislature, they may threaten a new party,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
which it's not even clear to me would actually hurt them all that much. It just
Right.
might make a few more rural seats competitive.
Hmm.
Because I don't see it peeling a whole lot off the cities where it's head to head between between the New Democrats and the UCP.
Hmm.
Um, so I would think that that's probably the end game, and when need be, do exactly what the convoy did for Danielle, which is elect a new leader, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what got rid of Kenny. I remember when she declared. A lot of people said, people that were like me, who were, paying, lots of attention to politics over the years and had been there during the big floor cross in 2014,
Yeah.
14, before the 2015 election. And we said, well, she's a finished commodity, not understanding that she had been out there organizing since about
Hmm.
2017, 2018, in addition to being on right-wing radio. And she was organizing in
Yeah.
a lot of the rural communities. She was doing, ag service board speeches, this kind of stuff. The convoy comes around. The reason why the New
Yeah.
Democrat War Room had just a treasure trove of clips of her staring into a computer screen saying crazy things, was that she was on that in that influencer space, right? Of
Yeah.
essentially what became the convoy. It was pre-convoy. And she used all of that in order to move herself into the premier's office. And so that process can very easily repeat itself. They'll have a hard time finding someone as good of a communicator as Danielle. Because she is the master, and she can just say things that are absolutely out of left field, and you can kind of go, "Oh, kind of see where she's coming from." Like you even find yourself doing it. She's the master at it, right? It'll be tough to find someone with her skills and that that 25 years of TV. That polish that she is able to deliver every single time. But that's what'll happen. That's what they'll use this for, is to do exactly to Danielle what they did to Kenny.
Or at least threaten it, I suppose. So
Yeah,
let's
and threats are enough because she will capitulate to them. We already know that.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the election map here. Majority currently is 44 seats. The NDP has 38. The election commission is going to add 2 more if there's an election after this year, correct? There will be
March
2
31st, the final report comes.
That's when they're okay. So then there'll be 2 more seats added to it, but there's also redistricting. Last time the NDP took 20 out of 20 in Edmonton, 14 out of 26 in Calgary, Banff, Kananaskis, and your seat, Lethbridge West. So where are those 6 to 8 target seats the NDP needs to defeat the UCP? And who are the target voters in those target seats that need to be spoken to and brought on side?
Well, I mean, I'll start with the easiest one, which is Lethbridge East. We missed it by 600 and change. That one stung a bit. I'm glad that Rob was able to run in the by-election to replace me so that we actually got him into the legislature because he deserved it in 23. He absolutely did. He was a great candidate, remains a great MLA. And so the first attempt at the boundaries was actually pretty good for us for winning Lethbridge East. So that's an obvious one. And then depending on how the boundaries go, 3 or 4 in Calgary as targets. And then depending on what they do with this sort of urban seat stuff in South Edmonton, there might be another 1 or 2 or in east of Edmonton there.
Just explain the urban.
Well, it's a combination of, and they allowed them so before this wasn't allowed.
Yes.
Of having this really obvious part of the city, and then out into the past the burbs, right, into acreage country and beyond. But they gave themselves the ability to draw a lot more of those. Courts have generally frowned upon those because on the grounds of what's called community of interest in drawing seat boundaries, right. Generally speaking, you want people who share a school board, share a regional economic development authority, those kinds of things, right? And so we'll see what they do with that. I was actually shocked that Lethbridge wasn't gerrymandered into oblivion. And just given who I know is on that commission, and I don't necessarily expect them to, I didn't anyway expect them to conform to the strict boundaries of the rule of law. But we'll see what they do when by all accounts, there were some pretty upset people within the UCP caucus, like their MLAs and ministers. And so I imagine that we will see their hissy fits reflected in the final report. But the path is through the small city of Lethbridge, certainly through the seats that we didn't, that were, some of them were really narrow misses in Calgary.
A few hundred votes, under 500 votes in several, I saw.
Oh, in some of them, but again, we also won some by 200 votes, right? And that with redistribution as well is can be of a bit of a concern. And then of course what we call the donut around Edmonton, because we won all of Edmonton, but there's population base around Edmonton, so the Edmonton donut as well. So the same targets essentially that we saw in the 23, and the same target voters, which are soft PCers. Like there's nobody left to get on the left. Right. And the reason why my margin grew from, I won by 228 votes in 2019, right? Like the blue wave came from me. Kenny was here. I don't know how many times they really, really, really wanted to get rid of me. They did not. Then I won by 3,000 votes in 2023. And those voters, I could tell you who they are. They were switchers from the UCP in 2019 who were worried about their CPP, who were worried to a certain extent about coal mining as well, because even soft PCers were worried about that. And in general, we're just really, really sour on the concept of Danielle Smith. Those are the voters. So the New Democrats need to be not too scary to those voters, need to give them a reason to come back to us if they came to us in 23, or a reason to be more disillusioned by the time, I don't know, late 26, 27, whenever they decide to call it.
Right.
Let's just one more question in on maybe the theme of how New Democrats need to show up for folks. So, 2023 election, we saw Danielle Smith really drag the Jagmeet Singh into the conversation. We had that different dynamic, of course, then with Justin Trudeau and his popularity levels in Alberta. But now that Trudeau's gone, we've about a month away from having a new federal NDP leader. What sort of advice would you give a new federal NDP leader that would help the provincial NDP in Alberta get ready for 2027 and get through it?
Well, first, do no harm. It's not just in Alberta, it's in Saskatchewan too. And so I think the first thing is to actually listen to the people who go to the doorstep and get yelled off the doorstep because of the Trudeau Singh alliance. And that still happens. To understand that was deeply damaging, and no amount of self-soothing and copium is going to make that go away. It is real, and it was a boat anchor. I saw it on my canvas sheets of people who were large sign locations in 2015 and 2019 automatically saying to me, "No, Shannon, I can't because of the Trudeau Singh alliance." And I'm like, I got nothing to do with that, right? And like, me. And they're like, "Don't care, we're done."
Right.
And so that's real. That's not anecdata. It's not as real in Edmonton. It's somewhat real in Calgary. It is absolutely all day long, take it to the bank, real in Lethbridge and in the Edmonton Donut and in some parts of Calgary and in Medicine Hat, where we could be competitive if the riding boundaries change. It is, and that is a fact. So that's why some of the most left-wing New Democrats that I know are all in on separating from the federal party.
Right.
Like it doesn't fall on ideological grounds. It falls on, do you see what we are up against?
Right.
And please do not wreck it for us again, because the confidence and supply agreement, all of that was bad. It was bad in Alberta and it was bad in Saskatchewan. So that's the first thing. Understand that it's bad. Understand why it's bad. Listen to us. I was one of the people screaming from the rooftops from the very beginning because I represented one of those ridings, right? There is a real problem on the left of thinking that you're in politics for you and your ideas and what makes you feel good and what makes you feel smart with your friends, rather than what the voters are telling you. They're not, and what the voters are telling you isn't necessarily something that is going to compromise your values. You're just going to have to figure out how to communicate it in a way that doesn't make you sound like a smug asshole.
Yeah.
And so often that's what happens on the left.
Yeah.
So my advice to that federal leader would be to leave us alone. Let us do our thing. Let us figure out how to win and do no harm.
And it's not like it's a new conversation. And I mean, I worked directly for the party for 11 years, including when Jack Layton was leader. And there many times, we asked him not to come into BC at different points in time. Right? We just don't need help right now. Thank you. Right? And that's a popular leader. So
we did too.
Always a dynamic. Yeah.
There were times, or as Brian Mason used to say, we would ask him to do something and then he would say, yes, I'll do it, and then not do it. But such was the nature of their relationship, but I mean, which was positive always. But that was at a time when the federal party wasn't a boat anchor. They are now. They are now. And they need to understand that.
Okay, well, lots ahead for a new federal leader to think about in their provincial dynamics, but a little bit of time to go in that race too. Huge thank you to you for joining us. We know you're so busy, and there's a lot to think on here and a lot evolving, and we'd love to have you back in the future if you're able, as we get a little further down this path as well.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
That'd be great.
there's gonna be more interesting times rather than fewer between now and October 19th and after.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Shannon.
Um,
There's a lot of great insight.
Thanks.
All right. Well, given the threat that Danielle Smith poses to Canada, and with Trump lurking in the background of this story that Shannon's told us about, it seems to me there's just it just seems to me that there's not much more important for us on the left right now
mhm.
than defeating Danielle Smith and making sure this country, if we're not a whole country, there can't be a social democracy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because it's the underlayers of how I think like many people have thought Danielle Smith's time was over, and I think
Mm,
Shannon made some great points about why she's so strongly positioned and what she's done to build that influence. We've been talking about those influencers on this show a fair bit, right? So it's like
yeah.
the things that we don't see. Danielle Smith really has done that job. So,
Mm,
that story I think remains to be told. We saw, in BC a prosperity project offshoot sort of organizing campaign pop up on the North Island, which has been a hotbed as well around Aaron Gunn's elected up there. So it's not, these aren't even just to Alberta. There's a movement here, and I think that movement piece is what we have to pay attention to as
mm.
well.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of related to that. I saw this a number of times, series. I think maybe it was on Facebook. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Uh, Posts from a place called the Dominion Society. Never heard of them before.
Yeah.
Has this kind of quaint British connection feeling to it, I suppose, Dominion Canada. And I read a couple of their posts as they scrolled through. And I mean, these guys were advocating for deporting Canadian citizens who are not heritage Canadians,
Yeah.
right? That is where
Yeah.
this debate is going. I don't even know. I mean, that's just a roundup,
Yeah.
a
Well, it's
roundup
funny. I
of
had this
Canadians.
conversation with some friends this week, and they were noticing on social media, I think it was Facebook in particular, how many new sort of fake groups are popping up
Yeah,
on their feed as well. So as Shannon's
yeah,
saying, we don't see everything, but maybe
yes,
now we're starting to see some of these fake, like some Russian created accounts that are feeding into the separatist movement as well. So
yeah.
there's a whole new element here. Maybe not so new, but we're seeing it more as
Yeah,
leftists.
yeah. Well, great interview with Shannon. Great to meet her. An important topic for Canadians. And let's take a break, and we're going to come back with Love It or Heave It. Before we wrap up, we're at that part of the show we call Love It or Heave It, about something we love and want to keep, or something we'd like to heave and forever forget. What you got, Nikki?
Well, I'm probably not going to have many of moments in this segment where I'm loving something that Donald Trump has done, but something
Mm,
did catch my eye
okay.
recently, which is that Donald Trump's focus on Greenland, which I think is, wholesale, we'll all agree hasn't been positive, but is actually giving Greenland a boost in tourism.
Right.
So tourism is like, Greenland's entered into the international dialogue, more people paying attention to it, learning about it. And so what we're seeing is that tour operators in Greenland are saying that they've seen, Intrepid Travel said they had a 93% jump in interest in website searches for Greenland
Right.
travel after Trump revived the bringing Greenland into U.S. ownership in the past few months, in the past year. So, as media attention's been amplifying awareness about the island, its beauty, its infrastructure, all those things, more cruise ships going in, now more adventure itineraries, they are actually seeing some of that positive tourism benefit. And if we think about the geopolitical aspects of that, the more people actually know about a country and are looking
Mm,
for it, I think that's, actually does have some net positive for them versus a country that maybe people don't know too much about and don't have that sort of attachment when these threats come into play. So,
mhm.
let's hope the heat stays off of Greenland from Trump and as they get more international support, but that their tourism continues to boom. If that's what they like, we all should acknowledge that some communities don't need as much interest in them, but if the good folks of the tourism industry in Greenland are doing well, We're all for it.
Let's be for that. Absolutely, sure.
What do you have this week, Tom?
Well, I am loving that some people just never change. That's what we've talked about Nate Erskine Smith here a couple times. He's the Liberal MP, took some very public swipes at Mark Carney, and now wants the Ontario Liberal nomination in this important Scarborough Southwest by-election. 10 days ago, the federal, remember he's an MP, the Federal Election Commission found that his campaign broke election finance law with illegal payouts to his campaign staff, and fined his official agent $2,300, which is, I think, like murdering somebody in your campaign is $2,400. So this is about as like these laws. I don't know. It just seems to me they're pretty weak, and so this is relatively strong. The other person interested in the nomination is accused of professional misconduct by the Law Society and can no longer practice law. So these are just fantastic choices, once again, that the Liberals are providing their voters with, and great reminders that the scandals of the Wynne and McGuinty era were just as expensive as the scandals we're going through right now with Doug Ford. People can't afford it.
No kidding. Okay. So it's a good love of no change. Good news on our end is that our podcast is free, although we will happily take sponsorships and donations to support it, including free support through promotion. So that's our show for March 2nd. We'll be back next week with more Left, East, West, and have a great week in the meantime.
Okay, take care, Nikki.
Bye, Tom.
Thanks for joining Left, East, to West with hosts Nikki Hill and Tom Parkin. We'd love to hear your comments, ratings, follows, and shares. It helps people find us. To become a Left, East, to West community member and to help us reach even more Canadians, subscribe using the link in the show notes. You can watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just search for Left, East, to West and subscribe. I'm Doug Hamilton signing off for Left, East, to West. We'll see you next week.